This is today's Talk on Tech. G'day everybody, there's something that I would like to discuss. And look, it may not be important to everybody what it is that I'd like to talk about, but I think it's important to consumer electronics, potential electric cars, and the future of Apple. Now that sounds like a lot. Jony Ive. Jony Ive has been with Apple for 3 decades. And he has been instrumental in creating so many things that we take for granted in 2019. This includes our iMacs, our iPhones, iPods, iPads, the user interfaces of our operating system, the iOS and macOS X, and so many things like our AirPods. All of these things have some of Jony in them, and it's a really big deal. Strangely, Jony, when he moved to Apple, was designing, if you don't know, can you guess? He was designing bathrooms. And you can see that DNA in a lot of what Jony creates. Now, a lot of people hate Apple, but a lot of people use products which Apple designed first and then the company they love followed. And yes, let's not get into the flame war of the fact that Apple is not always original. It's true. Xerox PARC did have a pointing mouse-like object, but they didn't really know what to do with it. Steve saw it and he turned it into something. And that's what he did with the iPod. And then from there, we got the iPhone, which started smartphones as we know them today, some 10 or so years ago. He became sort of a part-time designer for Apple a few years ago, and it started to feel like he was maybe going to cruise into retirement, which, of course would be okay. He would be worth an absolute fortune. He's done so much. He's in his 50s now, so why not? Why not do that? Why not retire? But Apple has come out and said Jony is leaving Apple and he's starting a new company called Love From, which its first client is going to be Apple. So this is interesting. He's not retiring, which would be fair and obvious, and no one would begrudge him if he did, except for the fact that so many millions of people have enjoyed what he and his team, the team that he has led, the team that he stood alongside Steve Jobs, who's been long gone now, and they created some of the most important, seminal, life-changing things that we use today. That's what him and his team did. So no one would begrudge him if he decided to retire. He's a sir. He'd be worth millions, no problem. But no, he's decided to create a new company. Now, what to me is the super interesting parts about this is, why did he leave? I mean, it's been almost 30 years. You could just say, I'm tired and I've done all that I can possibly do in this space, and that would be fair enough. That would be absolutely fair enough. But it would seem by creating this new company that Jony's got so much more that he has and wants to do. He has so much more inside of him. And I understand that as a creative person. I'm also in my 30th year of being in business, and I still love what I do, the creating and the creation and the challenges. I still love that stuff as much as I ever have. The business side of it's always tough, and that goes through ups and downs depending on the economy, and it can be quite tough. But creating beautiful things, that never stops being a joy. But what is the big deal of this for Apple? Well, in losing Steve Jobs all those years ago, that was a massive chunk of Apple gone, a massive part of its DNA gone. And to be honest with you, the Phil Schillers and so many other people we see on stage at WWDC and so on, I'm so sorry, but these guys, they don't inspire me in any way, shape or form. To me, a lot of them look like money men. Steve Jobs never did, and Jony Ive never did. And they are perhaps the only two people that we see outwardly facing as consumers. They're the two people that we get the most excitement from. So with those two creatives now no longer a core part of Apple, with the Apple core gone, does the apple go rotten? I'm concerned that Tim Cook is also just a money man, in the sense that he is very, very interested in short pipelines, big profits, and just churning product out, but less interested in changing the world. Now, he talks about privacy a lot, sure, and he talks about health a lot. Great. Two very important things. But part of the reason someone like me and millions of other people around the world love Apple is for that and a certain je ne sais quoi. A certain, I don't know, something that you can't put your finger on. It's that magic which Steve, and I do believe Johnny, because Johnny's been there for so long, working so hard, I believe they brought that to Apple. So without someone with the giant, absolutely gigantic status and gigantic presence that Steve and Johnny had to create, to bend reality. And they've always talked about Steve Jobs' distortion reality field that existed and was compelling and drove people nuts. But at the end of the day, it actually got things done, and it allowed amazing things to be created. And I feel like Johnny is interested in finding that magic. Steve certainly was. And I'm very, very worried for the future of Apple that those who remain are not as interested in the magic. Now, I'm sure there are people in there that are, but they won't be as senior. There was basically, I would say Johnny was basically the most senior person at Apple, period. Not Tim Cook, but Johnny, because Apple is a creative company and he was the head creative. And everyone else worked around what Johnny was thinking and what Johnny thought would work best for Apple. Now, with him gone, that creates a massive void. You have all the people that are under him that none of them have the same power, pull, or clout, or that friendship with Steve Jobs, that connection. So yeah, Apple, I do think, has for the last few years struggled to stand out, struggled to keep ahead of its competitors who are always chomping at the bit, and they are innovating themselves in their own way, and they are doing a fine job. Everybody can do a fine job, just like Nikon, Canon, Sony, Panasonic, Fuji. They all do a fine job. Nobody does a bad job. Nobody does a bad job. So none of Apple's competitors are doing a bad job. And Apple, every 5 to 10 years, they need to pull a rabbit out of the hat. Now with Johnny, it feels like he's been sort of edging out of Apple for, I don't know, maybe 5 years. There's been less rabbits out of the hat. And I know I'm the biggest person to say, come on people, we can't have revolutions in technology all the time. It's simply not possible. There's only so many sound barriers that can be broken. It's as simple as that. There's only so many sound barriers in technology that can be broken. So there's a lot of industries they've had a big impact on. And it's easy to forget that also they've had an impact on creative industries. Apple were very much the first that brought the desktop computer to people like me and allowed me to do my work more easily. Especially when we were looking at Windows 3.1 and maybe a little bit of Windows 95, which I was working on. Windows just, you needed to be a computer scientist if you wanted to do anything more than Word or Excel. Upgrading your computer, debugging your computer, making sure you weren't getting viruses, all those things were difficult back then. Whereas Apple made computing very, very easy for small business who didn't want to actually have to worry about the computer side of computing. They just wanted to be a user. So Apple have done a lot and helped a lot of industries. And Steve's been there for the majority of that, as has Johnny. The two absolute giants of Apple have been there for the majority of the time. Now with both gone, I wonder what the future holds. And Johnny, well, Apple's a client of his, but I suppose if he doesn't like what's going on, he can just move on, and that's fine with his millions and millions of dollars. That's absolutely fine. No big deal to him if he doesn't like the direction that they're heading in. It's like the Apple car. You know, I reckon Johnny Ive would have loved to have made an Apple car, and I reckon they've put a lot of work into an Apple car, and then I reckon the money men said, we just can't make enough money out of it, so we're going to scrap it. And that's the sort of thing that I don't think Steve would have done. He would have pushed for the most amazing, next groundbreaking electric car and beyond. He would have done it. He would have made it better. And that's the difference, I think, between Steve and Tim and the rest of the gang. So please tell me, what do you think? I mean, you might not even be interested in Apple at all, and that's okay, but I think everybody should be interested in Apple to some extent because they've changed so much of the world. They've been so influential on everything that all of us do. Even if you've never bought their products, a product you buy will have some sort of fingerprint or DNA of Apple's in it. Everybody, it's just like the camera companies. You know, one camera company does something amazing, and then the other camera company gets inspired by that company. Well, that's what's happened in all tech industries, including, let's say, Apple and Samsung with their phones. So we all benefit from Apple being healthy and in good condition. And what do you think with Johnny gone? What do you think? Will it change things? Maybe Apple will become a company more acceptable to more people because they're less about the art and more about, I don't know, making things a bit cheaper and generally more accessible. I'm not sure. It's a difficult one. But let's not forget the DNA of Apple is that for certain people like me, they made my business life easy. So please let me know what you think. I'd love to know what you think about the future of Apple. I mean, and let's face it, I'm asking this question and I'm going to get flamed on straight away. Apple are dead. Bring it. I suppose bring it. Fill the comments with that stuff. But we already know that every company is at great risk of failing, especially companies this size when there is so much hinged on the next great breakthrough. So try to give us thoughtful comments, not just flaming ones. I'd love to have thoughtful ones. So let me know what you think. Please subscribe, please share, please like, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. This is today's Talk on Tech. Ciao.